McLaren just proved that in Formula One, fairness isn't always as simple as it looks. At the Italian GP, Oscar Piastri had to wave Lando Norris back through, not because of pace, but because of a pit stop blunder. Sound fair? The real twist is this: there's nothing in the rulebook stopping teams from using orders to shuffle race results. So, is McLaren preserving integrity or quietly rewriting what fairness means in F1? Imagine a few laps before the race is over, crossing the line ahead of your teammate, fighting through the chaos of Monza, only to hear your engineer's calm voice telling you to move aside. That's exactly what happened to Oscar Piastri in Italy. He wasn't slower, just been stuck behind Leclerc for a few laps, ruined his chances more and more of winning the race. But he hadn't made a mistake. His only crime was being on the wrong side of a pit stop gone wrong, and McLaren decided the solution was to swap the running order back in Lando Norris's favour. For Piastri, it felt like a sting. For the fans, it set off a firestorm of questions. Monza was supposed to be straightforward: high speed, low downforce, and a circuit where track position is everything. Piastri cleared traffic early, ran clean laps, and looked set to hold his place in front of Norris. But then came the critical moment: his pit stop. What should have been executed in under 3 seconds dragged on, long enough to cost him nearly 3.5 compared to Norris. Those few seconds were the difference between rejoining ahead or tucking back behind. By the time he merged onto the main straight, the advantage he had built evaporated. Strategy windows at Monza are razor thin, and suddenly McLaren had a problem. From the pit wall's perspective, the call seemed simple. Norris had been released from his stop much cleaner, but had fallen in behind because of stack timing. The argument McLaren made later was that they weren't gifting Norris a position. They were restoring one lost in the lane because of slow equipment release. In theory, it was about fairness, a mathematical adjustment meant to neutralize bad luck. If you're looking at lap delta and pit loss charts, it almost checks out. Yet racing fans don't view fairness only through a stopwatch. What they saw on television was Piastri being told to get out of the way of his teammate. That difference in perception is why controversy erupted immediately online. The surface explanation was about restoring order, but the optics made it look like McLaren was establishing a hierarchy, one where Norris could rely on the team to protect his campaign, while Piastri was expected to comply. Critics flooded social platforms arguing that once the lights go out, track results should be earned wheel to wheel, not corrected with radio commands. It's not the first sport where this happens. Think about a football match where a referee stops play to call back a goal because of an offside in the build-up. The decision might be technically right, but to the fans in the stadium, it feels gutting. That's what Monza felt like: rulebook justice that carried an emotional penalty. Andreas Stella tried to steady the storm by framing the decision under what he calls McLaren's papaya rules, a phrase intended to describe the team's philosophy that individual ambitions must bend to collective fairness. The idea is to encode principles that prevent drivers from feeling like one is favoured above the other. Yet, when Piastri got the signal in Italy, those rules didn't look like neutrality. They looked like favouritism hidden behind spreadsheets and stopwatches. For many watching, that was the bigger problem. If the stated aim is equality, but the visible outcome is lopsided, trust begins to erode. Piastri's camp might nod along publicly, but behind the smiles and PR lines sits the real issue. Can a driver believe his results will truly stand if they can be rewritten from the pit wall? What unfolded on that Sunday wasn't an isolated misstep. It exposed the fragile balancing act McLaren is playing, pursuing fairness on paper while accidentally feeding suspicions of favoritism. And Monza was only the flashpoint. Because if you rewind the season, you'll see this wasn't the first time team orders reshaped a storyline. It's part of a trend that started long before Italy and is only intensified race by race. If Monza was the spark that blew everything wide open, Hungary was the first flicker that should have warned us. Mid-season in Budapest, the roles were reversed. This time it was Lando Norris who got the radio call to hand a position back to Oscar Piastri. The order went through, the change was made, and the race moved on without much drama. It was quiet, almost clinical. Fans noted it, but they didn't storm social media with the same level of fire that Monza generated. Which raises the question, why did Hungary feel like a minor footnote, while Italy sparked headlines worldwide? Part of the answer lies in how the scenarios unfolded. In Hungary, the context was clear. Norris had gained a temporary advantage through pit sequencing and was asked to reverse it. It looked straightforward, a swap to restore balance rather than a command to sacrifice a rightful position. In Monza, the same logic was technically applied, but the timing and stakes couldn't have been more different. At one of the fastest tracks on the calendar, with fans expecting a pure fight, fairness on a spreadsheet came across as manipulation inside the cockpit. That tells you something important. The act itself, swapping teammates, wasn't new. The perception was. And this is where Formula One history matters. Team orders have never been illegal. They have, however, been some of the sport's most scarred moments. Ask anyone about Austria, 2002, when Ferrari pulled Rubens Barrichello aside on the final straight to let Michael Schumacher win. Or look at Mercedes shuffling Bottas behind Hamilton in 2018 to protect a title campaign. Red Bull too, with the infamous Multi-21 clash, where Mark Webber realized Sebastian Vettel simply ignored the team's wishes. The issue isn't legality, it's optics and trust. Fans don't just watch the stopwatches, they watch for fairness. And when a call from the pit wall flips the order, those optics turn ugly fast. That's the conflict McLaren walks straight into. They are trying to package their system as clean and principled. Internal documents and repeated messaging call it neutral, a framework applied consistently across scenarios. But consistency is exactly the point critics challenge. What's the real threshold? Is a slow wheelgun blunder worth swapping thousands of horsepower on track? At what point does a correction for fairness become favoritism hidden behind lap times and pit deltas? If you can't explain the line clearly, drivers and fans will suspect it moves depending on circumstance. Psychology plays into this more than teams want to admit. Studies on organizational trust show that inconsistent rules erode morale even faster than openly biased ones. When humans can't predict the framework, they start bracing for unfairness, even if none was actually intended. In a season where the Constructors' and Drivers' Championships might be decided by a handful of points, that erosion is dangerous. Once a driver believes they're the secondary option, even subconsciously, it changes how they race, how they communicate, and how long they stick around. And context matters even more when you look at McLaren's journey. This is a team that clawed its way back from the brutal Honda era, where broken power units turned them into a punchline. By 2024, they were standing tall as Constructors' champions, proving their rebuild strategy worked. That made 2025 less about raw speed and more about structure, governance, and stability. Winning races is only half the game once you're back on top. Managing egos, clarity, and fairness rules become part of the competitive edge, because a car can run 2 seconds faster, but if one driver starts thinking the deck is stacked, the whole system wobbles. That's why Andrea Stella is pushing to codify something he calls the papaya rules. The vision is simple: create written, non-negotiable principles that drivers and staff can lean on when tension rises. By setting these terms in black and white, Stella hopes to protect the culture. But so far, the papaya rules remain more philosophy than hard code. That gap created the storm at Monza and left fans questioning what the words mean in practice when the pressure mounts. Hungary showed the theory. Monza revealed the cracks. Together, they prove McLaren doesn't just need to promote fairness, they need to define it so completely that neither cockpit doubts it when a call comes through. Because as this title fight sharpens, the question is no longer about one swap. It's about whether McLaren is engineering integrity for the long run, or accidentally scripting favoritism into their own playbook. McLaren's real opponent isn't just Red Bull's speed or Ferrari's strategy, it's the pressure test of their own values. When every point matters, the way you define fairness gets scrutinized harder than lap times. The papaya rules were pitched as a shield for trust, but Monza exposed how quickly that trust can crack under racing reality. Team orders are legal, but legality doesn't win loyalty. Culture does. McLaren's future may depend less on aero packages or power units, and more on whether both drivers still believe, deep down, they're racing for the same goal, not carrying different rulebooks.